It's the Sabres and the Sharks tonight following a Sabres loss to Montreal. Let's look at a different spot in the standings. You don't have to root for it, but how far down or up can the Sabres get in the standings? How bad is it going to get? Let's get to it on a deadline episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day, you everydayers. Thanks for tuning in again. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be sure to check us out on our YouTube channel. You can watch the show there. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like us on the YouTube. And if you would like to become a member of our Locked On Sabres text club, that is also available to you. Join subtext.com/Locked On Sabres. Sneaky Joe DiBiase coming to you on a Tuesday. It is another Sabres game day. We have a second of a back-to-back here at KeyBank Center. It's Buffalo Bills night at the arena, and that should give fans a little something extra to look forward to. And they also play a really, really, really bad team tonight in the San Jose Sharks. So we'll get to that matchup. And I do want to look at the bottom of the standings today because the Sabres in a week have crushed all our hopes and dreams that they could make that 1% to 2% playoff probability a reality. They have already crushed it. They're down to 0.4. If you look at it over at moneypuck.com, they're not going to make the playoffs. We knew they weren't going to make the playoffs, but I thought we could at least have some fun with it for a few weeks, and that is not happening. I do want to get to last night's loss against Montreal, but be sure to stay tuned for our little preview of the Sharks game tonight. What's going on in San Jose? Mike Greer is the GM. It's still not going well, but more so, a lot of today on how far down can the Sabres get, and what I know of this NHL draft so far is that it's not necessarily the best year to be at the top of the draft. So we'll get to all of that context, though, in a little bit. Let's start today, though, with the loss to Montreal. A second consecutive loss. The Sabres fall in both of the games in this home-and-home series against the Canadiens on Saturday at home and then Monday on the road. And this game is a tale of two halves. It's a tale of one period versus the next two periods. It's not even really a game that I want to give them a golf clap for and say, oh, well, again, you outplayed your opponent at 5-on-5 and came away with the victory. This is not a game where I really feel like giving them any sort of applause because they got down 3-0. And I really do think in hockey, there needs to be more filtering of advanced stats like goals above or expected goals or shot attempts and high danger scoring chances, possession, goals above replacement, all these different numbers that I like looking through. I think there needs to be more of a filter on what do you do when the game is within a goal or two? And some of those numbers do exist. Fenwick close. Like there are some of those numbers that exist that only will show the stats when the game is close. But that's not really the norm, that those are the numbers that you see widely shared. At least they're not the numbers that I look at right away. You kind of have to dig for them. Football has figured this out with some things. Football, if I wanted to look up the Bills' rate of throwing and their success on first and second down, I can get that in neutral situations. It's early downs. It's when the win probability of a game is within 60%, not when you don't get extra credit from some of those numbers in football if you pile the stat sheet when you're down by 28 and your win probability is 1%. And I know the Sabres got to overtime last night, but how much of that game that they dominated at 5-on-5 did they dominate at 5-on-5 because Montreal had a lead and they played back on their heels. I think hockey is yet to realize this, that there are other ways to execute holding a lead. But almost every team does it the same way. They build a multi-goal lead and they sit back, they park the bus, and they wait for you to come to them. And that's what Montreal did last night. They got ahead 3-0. They sat on the lead. They didn't really try to push forward. And yeah, the Sabres controlled possession. Of course they did, because they were trailing for 45 minutes of action. So that's how you end up getting to the Sabres thing dominating on the stat sheet. The game, though, almost gets away from them in the first period. How many of you thought this was going to be one of those ultra embarrassing games that they're going to get stomped 8-1 or 9-3, something like that? We haven't had one of those in a while. The Sabres don't have many of those at all this season. And last night, it was building towards that, kind of. The score felt like that. The emotions of the Sabres really is what made me think that. I thought they were playing fine in the first period, but emotions were running hot. They were undisciplined, and they were running around like chickens without their head on. They couldn't keep their emotions under control, and that starts with the top with Rasmus Dahlin. Now, it wasn't all their fault. Not at all. That first penalty on Dylan Cozens, a scrum in front of your own goaltender, Cozens and Brendan Gallagher and Josh Anderson are all getting into it. And what do the referees call? One penalty on Dylan Cozens, and that's it. Horrific call. Lindy Ruff was frustrated by it. Terrible job by the officials. You never do that, especially when it's that early in a game. When I asked Lindy about that this morning on WGR, Lindy said often what they'll do is they'll give you a warning, because they don't want to call penalties like that. They don't want to make the game one-sided. So they give you a warning. There was no warning here. There was none. It was just, nope, Cozens, you to the box. So yeah, he did throw a short right at Gallagher, who was in his goalie's crease, by the way, at the time. But then Josh Anderson runs in from behind, puts Dylan Cozens in a headlock, and rips him behind the net. That's not as worthy as a penalty as what Cozens did to Gallagher. It would have been so easy for the officials to call that a matching 2-minute minor, but they didn't. And that began, I thought, that was the beginning of the Sabres being, they went a little over the top. And that starts with Dahlin throwing Gallagher into the goalie. Listen, I like when Dahlin does that stuff. I love it. He just went a little too far. I loved when he threw Gallagher over through the crease and over the goaltender, started a scrum. I liked that he was throwing his body around, but the penalty on Jake Evans, that's one where you gotta keep your cool a little bit. Not fully, but a little bit. The guy doesn't have the puck. He's going after the puck. You have full body control. We're not at the end of a play. We're not in a critical scoring area. And you threw a shoulder at the guy's head. That's going to get called 10 times out of 10 in any environment. So that's one where Dahlin goes a little bit too far. And then the interference penalty in the third period, that's less emotional, and that might just be a dumb penalty that Dahlin takes, where he's setting a pick for JJ Peterka, but you didn't hide it. You got to hide that when you do it, and Dahlin didn't. So a couple of bad penalties by the Sabres captain. Listen, he does that. And again, I don't mind it. It reminds me of Eichel. Eichel in a different way. Eichel would slam his stick. He would break it over his knee. He would break it over the post. He got in a fight with Joel Eriksson Ek, I remember, with Minnesota once when the Sabres were losing, because the dude just lost his mind at all the losing. And I think Dahlin is the number one guy that I'm thinking of for this. I am not making any sort of leap to the next part of that conversation. I don't need to get into anything about when Dahlin wants out. That's not where I'm going with this. For me, it's more, you've got a hyper-competitive dude, and I'm really wondering how much the losing is wearing on him. Dahlin's been here for 7 years now, and it's got to take a toll. It's got to take a toll. And he acts like it takes a toll on him. He gets frustrated very easily, and he got frustrated in this game. I'm very happy to see him get that goal with just over a minute to play to make it a good night for him. You know, undisciplined night, but to get that goal, his 10th of the year, to tie it with just over a minute to play, send it to overtime. You know, he got there. Dahlin did. Overtime, just I don't know what James Reimer is doing. Yuri Kulik, I believe, was the culprit of going off to the bench at the wrong time. So the Sabres with a dumb line change, and here are these mental errors. You see them every game by this hockey team. It continues to crush them. And in this one, no bailout from your goaltender. That puck being low along the ice and short side should never, ever, ever go in. James Reimer allowing that goal in was pretty rough. That shot by Michael Matheson should never go into the net. Ever. Now, the other thing that, of course, let the Sabres down again was special teams. Special teams on this team continues to sink them. 2 power play goals given up and a shorthanded goal given up. And then a 3-on-3 goal given up. It's really these specialty situations. The Canadiens didn't score. The score at 5-on-5 was 3-0 Sabres. But what does it matter? What does it matter? Their special teams is so bad that it's undoing all the good that they're doing at even strength. So a super frustrating loss, but a very common type of loss for them, right? How many times do I need to show you special teams costing them games, mental errors costing them games, and you know, with Dahlin specifically, it's a little less often that this happens, but once in a while, you see important players not being able to control their own emotions. Nothing was really unfamiliar in this loss on Monday night. So that loss, 1 point, still last place in the Eastern Conference. And tonight we got San Jose. Let's, when we come back, take a look at the bottom of the standings and what is on the line. It's not the race that we asked for. It's not one that I'm even rooting for, but it's a reality that's beginning to set in that the Sabres are going to have one of the top lottery picks in the upcoming NHL draft. How far are they going to go? Up or down? That when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Wonderful Pistachios, and they are wonderful. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 5 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you fueled longer. I love pistachios. I love Wonderful Pistachios. I'll even sometimes throw a little hot sauce on them in the top. Don't knock it till you try it. It's pretty good. It's a great healthy snack. I've been doing Whole30 all year long, and there are only certain things I can have. I can't eat tree nuts, for instance, but I can eat pistachios, and that is my go-to salty snack. So if you're trying to eat healthier and you still want something that tastes great, I mean, you can't beat it. So be sure to get snackin and get crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch, no shells. They got that grab-and-go ease, a wonderful protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Sabres and Sharks on Tuesday night at KeyBank Center. It is Buffalo Bills night. If you're going to the game, Sean McDermott expected to be there. Dion Dawkins probably going to be there. He was at WWE Monday Night Raw on Monday, so I would expect he's in the arena. Dawkins goes to a lot of games at the arena, Bandits and Sabres. And I think Khalil Shakir probably will be there. That would make sense, right? He's in town. He just did his press conference on Monday at the Bills facility. And what better ovation other than, you know, if Josh Allen were to be there, but I probably doubt that Josh Allen's going to be there. Shakir, fresh off a new extension, put him up on the Jumbotron, get a standing ovation. So those would be my big 3 that I expect is McDermott, Shakir, and Dawkins, but we'll see who else we get. Maybe Josh Allen's there. I'd be a little bit surprised. Let's take a look at what we have for this matchup tonight, but more so on the big picture here to the rest of the end of the end of the season. The Sabres standings for the playoffs are no longer interesting. They are not going to make the playoffs, and they are probably not going to get very close. I put a poll up about a week ago. How close do you think the Sabres will get? And a lot of fans thought they would get to within like 6 points, 7 points, 8 points. Not many were more optimistic than that. Not many were more pessimistic than that. Well, presently they are 12 points back. So, getting within 8 seems like something they're probably not going to do. Now, if we flip it around, and this is something that we are all too familiar with, and we have done this exercise many times during the Sabres playoff drought. We are well practiced. Of course, we are experts at getting to the first week of March and wondering, hey, what are they going to be looking at in the draft? What kind of pick are they going to have? How high or low are they going to go? And you don't have to root for them to lose. I don't believe there is any prospect that is near worthy of that type of investment and that type of argument and that type of, rooting interest one way or another. You've got a couple of guys, Porter Martone, James Hagans, Michael Misa. These are 3 forwards that are expected to go at the top of the draft. Matthew Schaefer of Erie, who might go first overall. If not, one of those 4 guys probably goes first overall. So there are good players at the top of this draft, probably of maybe the Macklin Celebrini caliber, first overall pick of the Sharks from this past year. He, by the way, has an injury and he may not play against the Sabres. But we will see what further update we get. Celebrini, by the way, 44 points in 50 games for San Jose this year. Maybe at best, that's the caliber of player that we're talking about at the top of this year's draft. But there's no generational guy. There's no McDavid. There's no Matthews. There's no Eichel. There's no Jack Hughes. There's no guy like that. Probably. Maybe if you're lucky, you're getting a Jack Hughes. But I think probably not. It's probably more of a Celebrini level of first-round pick. So not nothing. Again, maybe the ceiling is Jack Hughes. How far can the Sabres get in the standings, though? Well, at the present moment, the Sabres are 29th in the NHL out of 32 teams. If you're watching along on YouTube, I got the standings up there. And that is with 54 points on the season. The Sabres, realistically, they're not going to be the worst team in hockey. San Jose is going to be the worst team in hockey, most likely. They have 41 points. That is 13 points fewer than the Buffalo Sabres have. Chicago is the only team that is even really near that. They are at 45 points. That is 4 points ahead of the Sharks. You have the 2 teams with the 2 most recent number 1 overall picks who are in the final 2 spots in the NHL right now. One of the 2 most likely is going to have the best lottery odds, not the number 1 pick necessarily, but the best lottery odds. Then you get to Nashville at 49 points and then the Sabres at 54. So if we are really being realistic, the Sabres are probably not. It would take an epic disaster and one of those horrific teams like Chicago or San Jose going on a little bit of a run here. The Sabres at worst are going to be 30th. At worst, they're going to be 30th, which would give them the 3rd best lottery odds, 11.5%, likely to pick 3rd, 4th, or maybe 5th, but probably 3rd or 4th in the draft. They could go as low as or as high as, whatever you want to call it. They probably can get to 26th. That is 5 points behind the Anaheim Ducks. That would be passing Seattle, who you are 2 points back of, Pittsburgh, who you are 4 points back of, and then Anaheim, who you are 5 points back of. So you got a 10-point range there from 30th to 26th. So what that means is the Sabres are most likely going to be between the 3rd worst team and the 6th worst team in the league. And if you look at the lottery odds for that, really, there's not much difference in the lottery. Where they are right now is 9.5%. If they were to be worse than Nashville, it'd be 11.5%. And what do I care about 2%, right? If they were to be worse than or to be better than Seattle, Pittsburgh, and Anaheim the rest of the way, you get to 6.5%. So you could go down 3%, but 5%, nobody's losing sleep over it. Nobody really cares about it. It's more about how high or low you could really fall in the draft. If you end up passing all these teams and get to the sixth worst team, then you could pick as low as 8, really. Like Anaheim could pick as low as 8 from where they are right now. Versus if you are to be where Nashville is, you could pick 3rd. So for me, it's less about, give me an extra 2% to pick 1st overall. Give me an extra 3% to pick 3rd. I don't really care about that. For me, the only thing worth care abouting at all, and it's not even that much, is would I rather pick 3rd or would I rather pick 8th? And maybe you think there's a big difference there. In this draft, maybe there is a tier break somewhere around 5th or 6th. We'll talk more prospect stuff with some of our guests a little bit later on in the spring. But that's basically what's on the line. You don't have an elite prospect. They could probably be as low as 3rd, and they could be as high as 6th. So they could move 4 or 5 spots depending on how the season ends up here. Now, when we come back, what are we going to get from tonight's game against the worst team in the league, the San Jose Sharks? We'll get to that when we return here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on Locked On Sabres. Tuesday edition of the show. The Sabres are home to face the San Jose Sharks. I believe their only trip, it has to be, right? Their only trip to Buffalo of the season. The Sharks. What's some Sabres and Sharks memories? Of course, Flight 3409, right? Did I just get the numbers wrong on that? I always want to double check. In Buffalo, 3407, excuse me. The game after the tragedy of Flight 3407, 15 years ago now, 16 years ago, where Craig Rivet doesn't actually score that goal, looking back. Craig Rivet takes the shot from the point. I believe Jason Pominville tips it, ties the game with seconds to go, and the Sabres win in overtime. One of the greatest regular season games in Sabre history, if we're being real about it. The emotion in that building and what ended up happening a day after one of the biggest tragedies in years in our area. Now, since then, there's one other game that comes to mind against this opponent, and that is Jeff Skinner scoring in overtime in the 10th of their 10-game win streak back in 2008. Dahlin, actually, on the ice for 3-on-3 overtime, puts the puck behind his own back and tries to go and get it, but I think he gets covered up by maybe it was Erik Karlsson, whoever, and Skinner flies in from behind, grabs the puck, forehand, backhand, puts it in, 10 wins in a row, building goes crazy, and we thought they were going to make the playoffs, and that did not happen at all. Since then, not a lot that's memorable to me, but if you've got a Sabre Sharks memory, you want to pass it along, feel free. Twitter or our text club is good to do that. For tonight's game, we don't have a lot of details yet because the Sabres have not had their morning skate. The name to watch, of course, will be whether we're going to get Jason Zucker. Jason Zucker has not played in since Saturday, and he didn't play that whole game. So, remember last Saturday before that first game after the Four Nations, he gets hurt. Does a shot at the skate against the Rangers. Hasn't been the same since. And we will see if he's going to make a return before Friday and potentially get traded. That is certainly possible that he does not play another game for the Buffalo Sabres, but we will see. Goaltender-wise, you would expect Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in between the pipes because you had James Reimer yesterday. So Luukkonen tonight for the Buffalo Sabres. And if we are looking at San Jose, do they have an announced goalie yet? Not at this point in time. The Sabres, though, are a massive favorite tonight. They are minus 220, which for hockey is about as good as it gets. Minus 220 over the Sharks, who are plus 180 on the money line. Over-under is 6.5 goals for this one. My sneaky good bet for tonight's game, I am going to go with Alex Tuch to record 2+ points, and I could get that at plus 280. He's been awesome lately. Tuch's been great. And I know these trade articles are popping up about him. I don't think it's reality at all, though, that he is even at threat of getting dealt. So I go Alex Tuch to record 2 or more points at plus 280. He's been playing great. He's been burying chances where he's got a 4-game goal streak going. I'll go with Tuch 2+ goals. 2+ points, excuse me. And that's all we got for you on Sabres and Sharks. So enjoy the game. Enjoy Buffalo Bills night. If you are going, let me know how the hot dog of the day is. And you hope we don't get a toxic environment. Because if we're at a point now in the season where if these games start going sideways, we might get some Fire Adams chance. We really might. And don't put it by the fans tonight if it doesn't go well against the worst team in hockey. Because They're just, to me, they should just be trying to do now is avoid embarrassment rest of the season. That's how low the bar is for them. And it would certainly be embarrassing to get crushed by the worst team in hockey. So just don't do that tonight, please. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast. If you are looking for some more hockey talk, be sure to make your second listen Locked On NHL. They're bringing you the league-wide stories that matter, local coverage that you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. A lot of good stuff on the Ovechkin chase and, of course, plenty of others. There's a weird story from the Stadium Series today that Ohio State almost didn't host the game because they didn't want the NHL to use the Stadium Series. They didn't want the word "the" in the Stadium Series, because Ohio State has a trademark on the, like the Ohio State. They're the only ones allowed to sell merchandise, I guess, with that. How stupid. You know, in the list of stories of dumb trademark stuff, hockey got into the waters a little bit this week with Ohio State almost putting up a fit because the NHL put "the" in their Stadium Series gear, which who even cares about Stadium Series merchandise? I mean, if we're being real. All right. Rant over. Let's get out of here. I'll talk to you tomorrow, hopefully after a Sabres win here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.